So the next thing I wanted to talk about was, let's say we had nuclear power. We were developing nuclear power. We also need to develop the grid to distribute this electricity. I think that we should move towards a hydrogen economy. Right now we have a situation unfolding known as peak oil, which essentially boils down to the fact that it looks like we've used up half the oil that we're going to be able to use. And the second half is more difficult to get at, and therefore will be more expensive, and there will be less of it. Right now we get around in our cars from petroleum. I think we need to switch over to hydrogen. Sometimes when this is discussed, I hear people say hydrogen is not a source of energy. It's similar to saying like a dead rechargeable battery is not a source of energy. Now, I hear people say we get our hydrogen from some process involving steam and coal that releases CO2 into the atmosphere. Well, I'm not talking about getting hydrogen from that process. I'm talking about getting hydrogen from electrolyzers. The electrolyzers would be connected through the power distribution system, known as the grid, to nuclear power plants. So the electrolyzers would be at fueling stations. Now I know there are fueling stations in California, hydrogen fueling stations. I'm not sure how they work, where they get their hydrogen from, but I imagine that this is a viable approach. Now, people say, well, fuel cells haven't advanced enough to be used. What I'm talking about is burning hydrogen in internal combustion engines. There is a production car known as the BMW Hydrogen 7, which can run on hydrogen, and it can also run on gasoline. The type of vehicles I'm talking about would be hydrogen only, I'm thinking. One argument against them is the fuel tank has to be 4 times the size to get the same range. So I'd just be like, okay, make the fuel tank 4 times the size, you know. I mean, it's an emergency, you know. I think the price of oil will be going up. So it's just going to go up, up, up. There will be fluctuations, but you need to move off of it. You know, battery-powered vehicles work with this system. It's no problem. Battery-powered vehicles probably aren't the answer because of the fact that you can't recharge them on the road. Some people may say, well, what about swapping out the batteries on the road? I don't think that's as good an idea. I think just running things on hydrogen would be probably the best way to go. There are emissions when you run hydrogen in an internal combustion engine because air is about 80% nitrogen. So you have nitrogen in there during combustion. So I think you get nitrogen compounds. But it is good for cutting out greenhouse gases. The overpopulation problem is something that I've seen coming my whole life. And I've just been wondering about it, how it can be. I see a big part of the problem right now is the fact that people always have to talk about economic growth as a solution to our economic problems. It seems to me that what they're talking about is population growth. I've heard it said that the United States is planning on allowing 100 million people in, or increase the population by 100 million in the next 40 years. So I think this is basically to cause economic growth. Now, we have a problem in the United States where we have water shortages. So, I mean, it has to be obvious that we can't keep having more people on this planet. As the peak oil crisis unfolds, it's going to hurt the agricultural system in the world because we rely on petroleum for fertilizer and to run farm equipment and for various reasons. So we're getting to the point where we can't produce as much food, but we're getting more people all the time. Now, one thing that I've always found to be very strange is whenever I heard what the peak population was going to be, sometimes I heard 9 billion, sometimes I heard 12 billion. I never heard why it would peak there. So I was left thinking, well, I guess the rate that people are starving and dying in wars and crime and disease is the same rate that they're being born. That's the only conclusion I could come to, why it would peak. So that's a pretty horrible system, that you just sit around waiting for that to happen. So we have to try to mitigate things and get birth control to people. You don't need more and more people. You need a new system. A new system that doesn't rely on more people. Because it's just madness to keep having more people. So, I think InMendham is the most important person on YouTube. I go to him first, always very interested in what he has to say. I think that he's the guy that can steer us in the right direction. So I think that it's to everyone's advantage to get on board with what InMendham is saying. The situation doesn't look good. When the situation doesn't look good, when it looks this bad, that is the time to break out the LSD. Now, hopefully, I have said enough about the risks involved in LSD so that everyone understands these risks. Anyone thinking about taking LSD should research it very carefully. I may have made some major omissions here. I may have made some inaccurate statements. I hope I didn't make anybody angry. Wouldn't have come on YouTube and spoken about this if I didn't think that there was an emergency. And I didn't think that I could be of some assistance. One thing I've learned from taking LSD on a regular basis is that something that's said about LSD that is important for the future of humanity, I agree with. I notice that every time I take it. I'm like, this could really make a difference. If people took this stuff, they could really pull back from the brink, I think. So I have noticed that characteristic to be true about LSD. I think it is very important for the future of human civilization.